St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist Ben Frederickson, STLtoday.com. Good morning, Ben Frederickson.
Good morning, McGraw. You mentioned second worst thing might be playing for the team owned by Stan Kroenke.
The Knicks have had a pretty woeful 20 years, though.
That's true.
Yes.
But yeah, anything the Kroenke brand touches, you got to be a little skeptical about.
All right.
And those teams aren't winning much either these days.
Fair enough. All right, your Cardinals sit at 4.5 games back of the wild card after pulling a split with the Brewers over the weekend. They're only a game and a half out of the wild card, and people think the sky is falling. Is the sky really falling for the Cardinals?
Well, it's not falling as much as it was when they played two terrible games against the first-place Brewers to start that four-game series. The trend isn't great, and that's what people are worried about. The Cardinals are in the stretch now of games against winning teams, and they haven't won a series, and this will be they're looking at if they lose their next one or don't win it, it'll be their fifth consecutive series without winning one. You got to go back to when they beat the Reds for a series victory here, and that was a long time ago. So I think people aren't loving the trend, and those two first games in Milwaukee were games that made you go, where is this team at? What are they lost themselves? What's going on here? Because they had the game where they just looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, and then they had the crushing walk-off loss where Jack Flaherty went out and pitched to Jim, and they weren't able to get him a run, and he gives up a home run, and all of a sudden the game's over. So I think the Cardinals responded well to that, to be able to rally from that and beat the Brewers in back-to-back games to salvage a split. That's good, and they need to get home and take care of some business because the schedule isn't easing up. They've got a run of first-place teams here, and if they don't find a way to get some wins and win a series or two, then they're going to be pretty far out of that wild card category that you mentioned headed into the All-Star break.
So I get we watch every game and every bad play and every error and every Marcell Ozuna jumping over the fence and the wall hitting the warning track, right? We live and die with each things. But you really got to take a 10,000-foot view of things, and that is they've been decimated by injuries. Ozuna hasn't had the first half that anybody expected. You've got all sorts of issues, and so one could make the argument that they're in pretty good shape considering how many injuries they've had this first half of the season.
You can make that argument for the pitching for sure, because their rotation has been rocked. They've lost Adam Wainwright, who had a good spring, and now he's a non-factor. They lost Alex Reyes, who everybody was excited about seeing. And then their bullpen, which has been a source of much angst, was never looked like it was supposed to look because of some guys who were hurt. So I'll give you that on the pitching. The offense, not so much, because really the only injuries have been Yadier Molina. He's been back nearly a month, and Paul DeJong. And while Paul DeJong's a great young shortstop who had helped this team out a lot offensively, if that's the reason this offense hasn't got off the ground, then this offense isn't going to be as good as it was advertised. The offense, to me, is the biggest concern, because you've got a guy like Dexter Fowler who, for the first time all season, had a multi-hit game yesterday, and you saw what a difference that makes when he's able to contribute. And then you have some pieces that aren't firing. The Cardinals are in the bottom third of every major statistical category that you want for offense, except for home runs. They're kind of a home run and hold on offense, and they don't hit enough home runs to operate that way. They've got to get back to doing exactly what they did yesterday against the Brewers, getting guys in motion, playing some small ball, getting some doubles in there, and then having a home run that helps break a game open. But they can't just be home run and then nothing else. And I think that's what people are probably most concerned about, is the offense, because it hasn't been decimated by injuries. They've had one to Yadier Molina and one to Paul DeJong, who's nearly back. And once he gets back, there's no more excuses for an offense not to be more, havoc creating, because that's kind of what this thing was built to do.
What's interesting to me in watching not just the Cardinals, but baseball overall, is Baseball used to loathe strikeouts. Now they don't mind strikeouts, right? Now they would rather strike out than walk. And it's not just the Cardinals striking out 19 times in a game or not walking during a series with the Padres. That's all of baseball seems to be going that way.
Yeah, it's the three true outcomes. It's the launch angle revolution, and I think there's going to be. I think the game over time will correct itself. But if you're going to load up on the strikeouts and you're going to hunt for home runs, then you better be good at hunting for home runs. The Yankees are doing this very well this year. It helps that they have Stanton and Judge,
right.
But the Cardinals aren't necessarily that team, so they might want to rethink their approach a little bit. I thought the way they pounced on the Brewers yesterday was exactly the way this team should play. You have Jose Martinez come in and hit a huge home run, but before that you had Dexter Fowler and Harrison Bader find a way to get on. You had a pitcher move a guy over with a bunt. You had aggressive base running that put guys in position to score. Matt Carpenter hitting a double, taking what a pitcher gives him. I mean, it was just they have to be more multifaceted if they're going to be the offense they can be. And they're not a home run or bust team, yet they're playing like one. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of the stagnant and a lot of the frustration is coming from. If they can get back to being kind of the funneling on base percentage to their bigger hitters and then going deep in a lineup that doesn't try to do too much, and that's a dangerous team. And as you mentioned, they're not so far out of it where it's, hey, pack it in, boys. They have overcome some tough spots, but they got to get back to being the team that, well, really they got to get to being the team that they thought they could be at spring training offensively, because we haven't seen that except for maybe really only one game, and it was yesterday against the Brewers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know how much of that is the stat guys. I get the math guys are all talking launch angle, and that's the new baseball world, but I don't get it. And for that matter, I don't see bullpens around the league surviving, right? I mean, the starting pitchers, sometimes they're lucky if they go 5 innings, and then the bullpen is in charge of more of the game than the starting pitching.
Yeah, and that's a trend. The bullpenning is becoming more and more popular. You're really, I think, going to see it get to the point where they either limit the number of pitchers a team can carry, or it's just kind of going to develop into you have a few really, really good starting pitchers who go deep in games, and then you have a bunch of kind of replaceable starting pitchers that go 5 innings and hand things over. And it means that relievers are going to make more money, and that there's going to be, a really increased demand for good bullpen management. And I think at some point in time the game might have to wonder if it's being flooded with relief pitching too much. It does create an obstacle for managers because they have to really be in charge of, okay, who's healthy, who can go, how are we not overusing this guy,
right.
What's the best matchups, and really adds a layer to the game that you really only saw come out previously in the postseason, right? When every game means so much. Well, now you have Gabe Kapler in Philadelphia, who's sending in 5, 6 relievers on a dog day summer game because he thinks that's going to be the best approach here. We heard all along last year, the past 2 postseasons, that teams couldn't do this in the regular season. But now you've got a lot of them that are like they're going to want to try here.
Yeah. What do you make of the strike zone, Ben, Fred, from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch? I anecdotally, I think that the strike zone has expanded exponentially over the last, a couple of years. It seems like they're calling a lot of strikes that weren't strikes a few years ago.
Yeah, I've heard arguments for expanding the strike zone to increase offense, to force the hitters to swing.
Right.
I guess maybe push back on that a little bit. I think it would help the hitters out if they felt like they had a consistent strike zone. Tommy Pham got ejected this weekend in Milwaukee, and when you went back and watched why, I totally understood it. I mean, here's a guy who's really struggling, who's in a spot to help his team maybe score a run, and he can't figure out where the strike zone is, and it changes for him every at bat. And then you have, the Brewers come up and they're getting different calls. I'm not saying the ump was against the Cardinals, but the ump was having a hard time giving the Cardinals an idea of where the strike zone was. And I think players deal with that a lot. Some guys really are on the far edge of it. I mean, there are times when Matt Carpenter is probably not taking a not swinging at a pitch that is a hair off what he thinks is the strike zone. And there are times when he probably has a better idea of what the strike zone is than the umpire. He probably has better eyes, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he kind of takes it a little too far at times. He might be better off, hitting a pitch that he might feel like is a hair outside than walking back to the dugout and stewing over a called third strike. But there are some pitches that if you just watch and watch the games, there are some pitches every single night that you go, man, I don't think that was a strike, and then you watch the replay and it proves it.
Right.
So I think developing some sort of a consistent strike zone is going to be a lot more important than expanding it or shrinking it. Just give hitters an idea of what it is and stick to it. And how is that done? I don't know. I mean, it's such a hard job. I feel for umpires,
right.
But there has to be some sort of accountability there and improvements there. If you can improve the game through replay and all these things, then you have to help the umpires out with the strike zone. I'm not advocating for getting rid of them. I like the human element of the game, but some of these strike zones are a little out of control.
Ladies and gentlemen, I agree with Ben Fred. Mark the day and the time on that, right? There you go. Ben, have a good week. Thanks for coming in.
You bet, man. Anytime.
Right. Every Monday, Ben Fred is with us, and then with the sports guys at night. And, of course, you can always read them at stltoday.com.